Okay, Frank, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Robin. Can you hear me?
I can. I think we're looking good to go.
And we are recording?
We are recording.
Very well. And I see Jen is here and a number of the members of the commission. So we can get started. We will call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Durham to order. It is Wednesday, May 20th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. And we are holding this meeting via Zoom, which is a remote teleconferencing meeting platform. Jen, if you can hear me, would you please call the roll?
Hi, everybody. Josh Edinger,
Here.
Joe Pasquale. Joe? No. Matt Thompson,
Here.
Chris Bailey,
Here.
Jim Frazier,
Here.
Dick Erickson,
Here.
Frank DeFelice,
Here.
Will Spooner,
Here.
Michael Fumiati, John D'Annunzio, Phil Auger,
Here.
and Jim Piotrowski.
I see Jim's here.
I'm here. Got on mute.
Okay.
All right. Do we need to seat any alternates, Jen?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 9. Oh, actually, we could see, we could see both Phil and Jim.
All right. Very good. So Phil and Jim, you'll be seated to vote on tonight's matters. And is there any discussion? Let's see here. Seating on alternates. Everyone, of course, can participate in discussion. And with that, we'll move on to item number 4. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Hearing none, a motion to approve the agenda would be in order.
Chris so moves.
Moved by Chris. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jim Piotrowski. Thank you, Jim. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed. With that, we will move on to item number 6, public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on matters that are not on the public hearing for this evening? Again, any members of the public wishing to speak on matters that are not on the agenda for a public hearing? All right, hearing none, we'll move on then. We'll need a motion to reopen the public hearing, I believe. Is that right, Robin?
Yep.
Okay. All right, would somebody like to make that motion?
Chris so moves.
Chris moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jim Piotrowski. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed. And for the record, the members that were seated for the first part of tonight's meeting will be seated for the public hearing.
Not to string things along, but if I'm reading the minutes from the last meeting correctly, we had moved to continue the public hearing today at 8 p.m.
Oh, we did.
I'm early.
Oops.
Robin, I know this is a matter that's on the commission's own doing, but did we say, if we said to 8 p.m., what do we need to do? We need to wait till 8 p.m.?
So I don't remember you guys making the motion to say 8 p.m., but the agenda doesn't have a time. So I guess it's up to you. I mean, we don't have much business to talk about other than that. We could do.
The thing is, our minutes aren't official until they're adopted, so we could just amend the minutes.
when we get to that point. So I don't think we need to worry about that 8 p.m. and can consider a typographical error in the minutes.
Yeah, I mean, who made that motion? I don't recall us setting a time, so.
Neither do I.
According to the minutes, it says Dick made the motion. I seconded it to continue it at 8 p.m. tonight. I mean, I don't know if he actually said 8 p.m., but if it's in the minutes, I don't know.
Hmm.
If people were planning on coming in at 8, I don't know.
Jen, do you recall? No.
I mean, we'll go through the rest of the agenda and come back.
Yeah.
That'll be quick.
I don't know. I got a lot of changes to those minutes to do, so.
All right. All right. With that, I guess we'll go back into our regular meeting. Do we need a motion to do that now?
No, I think you can just move on to the next items and we'll go back as close to 8 if that's what you want to do as we can.
Sorry.
Might as well.
That's okay.
All right. So let's move on. We'll go on to, rather than item number 7, which is obviously the adoption line item, let's go to payment of bills, which is number 8. We do have a bill from Jen Keough for minutes. And I believe, what's the amount, Jen? $187.50? Is that correct?
She's shaking her head, yes.
I see her. So $187.50 for Jen Keough to do minutes of the last meeting. Are there any other bills that we had, Jen? Nothing? Okay.
That's it.
All right. So with that, a motion would be in order to pay the bills.
Move to pay the bills.
Okay. Motion by Dick Erickson to pay the bills. Is there a second?
Second.
And that is a second by who? Who was that? Matt? Matt?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed.
Is that the only bill?
Frank,
That's the only bill.
Huh.
You're not used to that, huh? All right. With that, we'll move on to minutes of the previous meeting. We do have minutes and they were in your package. If anyone would like to take a minute and look through those, we certainly have the time to do that.
hey, Frank, it's Joe. I joined the meeting late. I apologize.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe. And Jen, did we seat anybody for Joe?
We sat both Phil and Jim Piotrowski.
Wait a minute, for Joe?
No, I didn't say who was for who, so.
Okay. All right. All right. So who do we have that we set? Was that
Phil Auger was
Yeah,
seated
yep.
and Jim Piotrowski were seated and Joe was out and Michael Fumiati.
okay? And Michael Fumiati is not here now yet, as that I see. Is that correct?
I haven't seen him.
Okay. All right. Jim, do you have any objection to letting Joe take over?
Not at all. I'll
All
leave
right.
it in Joe's capable hands.
All right. So Joe, welcome, and you'll be seated in lieu of Ostrowski. All right. Minutes from the previous meeting. Is there anyone that'd like to make a motion to approve them or modify them?
So moved.
Moved by Dick Erickson. Dick, that's to accept them, I assume? Yes? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Matt. Is there any discussion on the motion to accept the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? And if you were not at the meeting, it would be appropriate to abstain, of course. All right.
Hold
That
on,
brings-
sorry.
Yeah,
So, last meeting, we had some issues as to who was here and who wasn't here. I had a problem getting in, as did other members of the commission. So if you can look at the attendance, I think it was Will Spooner who said he was here and I had him as absent. And Jim Piotrowski, did you ever manage to get
I
on
was-
to that meeting?
I was dialed in on the phone, Jen. I could not get in on video, but I was on the phone.
But you did, so you were. So I'm going to need to amend the minutes to show that Jim was here. Will, and you were here too, right?
That's right.
Okay. So that'll be the amendment to the minutes. if That's all right with everybody.
I make the same motion except with the amended minutes.
Okay.
All right. And Matt, do you second that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
All right. Okay, we'll vote on that again then. This is the motion to accept the minutes as amended to correct for the folks that were on the call. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed.
Talking about tonight.
All right.
They can't hear you anyway.
Oh, yes, we can.
Yes, we can. All right. And with that, we'll move on to item number 10, which is the zoning enforcement officer's report. Robin, did we have anything from Jerry?
He's on, I think.
I just came on.
Oh, hi, Jerry. How are you?
I was struggling a bit trying to find it through this phone, but yeah, how was everybody?
Very good. And we're looking forward to hearing your report. So go right ahead.
All right. We've had a number of complaints, residents with the cars. There's 60 R Tri-Mountain Road is making good progress on their garage. They have 3 fewer cars than they had before they got rid of the unregistered dilapidated vehicles. We have 21R Dead Hill, which is an ongoing issue. It's going to be ongoing for some time. Robin and I are going to work together to get this timeline figured out for multiple, over 20 vehicles there that they've convicted. So he's in violation, and we had a discussion today on how, Robin and I had a discussion today on how we're going to go forward with that. And excuse me, there were some comments on the neighborhood at 60 Oak Terrace, Royal Oak, I'm sorry, operating it's a home occupation he's been permitted for, and there's been neighbors concerned with the escalation of activity. I've been there. I've went to and spoke with the property owner. He's bringing his equipment to manage his own property and do some maintenance on his trailer. He changed out some trailer tires about a month ago, I guess. And so I think the neighbors are satisfied that he's not operating his business out of there anymore, but he does use it as his home office business. Then we had another concern. I think it was, I'm not sure, it wasn't Matt. One of the members had concerns about potential dog kennel being out on Higginham Road or Blue Hills Road, and that certainly there's dogs out there, but that doesn't fall into the purview of planning and zoning. If it's a nuisance, then it would probably be the dog warden or another department. But I didn't see any presence of a dog kennel, just a bunch of dogs barking in the residence, and they have a pretty large parcel there. And just some other ongoing matters with applications through town, but we have a upgrade that's been approved for Valero gas station with their signs and lighting and what have you to match or catch up to speed with the other gas stations with LED lighted signs. I think the last meeting you folks were in agreement with adopting the use of LED pricer signs for the pricing on the gas stations. So that project is moving forward. And I haven't heard anything back from Torres and Stone with any applications for their use changes. Other than that, I really don't have much other than ongoing neighborhood complaints that we're addressing in the office.
All right. Any commissioners have questions for Jerry?
Yeah, this is Joe. Jerry, what is the plan for Dead Hill Road and the 20 cars?
Well, the property owner now is I was told that the scrap yards are all closed at the moment, so he's taking these vehicles out 2 or 3 at a time with a dump or a large container. we want to set a timeline. We haven't done that yet. He's been cooperative. He's been moving forward. Now they're both unemployed. I think Robin and I decided we would start this timeline beginning June 1st, and with progress, it's going to be hard to get all those out in a 30-day, but we haven't nailed down a concrete end date yet, Joe.
Okay. And I also like to mention on Main Street, the Dunkin' Donuts at the south end of town
Right.
has got a banner
Yeah.
out on the lawn.
So I understand, and I've had some conversation, and I'll take some opinion. Here we have a situation with this COVID where people that are open for business are desperate, and they're going through any measure to advertise that they're open. I did not speak with them, but I'm happy to speak with them to let them know that we understand you want to advertise you're open. I have a hard time with trying to eliminate their advertising at this time for operating a business. Not every business is able to be open, and the ones that are reaching out in any means possible to the signage or whatever. So I'll take your opinions. My personal thought is to penalize them after the penalty everybody's going through right now. I'd like to just sit back, have a conversation, and when this release of the restrictions comes up, then certainly I think they all know that signs are an issue. But that's my opinion. So I haven't been addressing those, but it has been conversation with just that thought. Penalizing them more when they're already being penalized because of this situation. It's not going to go over well.
Yeah, and I've seen it. It's been out there. I didn't mention it the last meeting, but it's been out
Right.
there now for probably about a month.
Oh yes, I agree, Joe. It's probably been longer than a month. And
they do have the ability to put it on the building.
Right, and then I think it wouldn't be conforming either. There's the flag banners that are out there and the wavy signs. Everybody's got them up, and I really have a hard time going out there and wrestling them when they're doing anything they can to operate a business. But I will certainly reach out to them, and when we have, I'd say the 1st of June, hopefully all this will be let up enough where we're in the phase 3 to get back to somewhat a normal operation, and certainly let them know that that's not permitted.
Okay.
Just to get my opinion on it is, yes, we should provide leniency. I mean, it's fine to have a conversation, but I wouldn't ask them to take it down until they can actually open for real. Right.
I think there's executive orders out there that indicate enforcement as being, we'll just say lenient, or giving a 90-day from the 1st of April, I think was the date, a 90-day grace period where there's no penalties, no, unless egregious violation, then that certainly it needs our attention. But some of this stuff, I'm just sitting back and hoping this all blows over and we get back to some sense of normalcy.
Okay.
Any other comments from the commissioners? All right, this is probably going to be an appropriate segue. We'll go into the town planner's report, and I know that Robin received some information on the governor's orders relative to outdoor dining and so forth. So go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, so there's been a few executive orders that have come out since our last meeting, and as you will recall, we sort of talked about what stance we wanted to take on the outdoor dining or expansion of outdoor dining. And I think I had indicated to you guys at that meeting, I knew that there was going to be an executive order coming out. I had seen the draft before it had come out. So that did indeed get issued, and it came out after the fact. It pretty much exempts zoning for placement of outdoor dining in parking areas, adjacent lots next to lots that someone might own, expanded patio areas, expanded liquor permits. They do have to fill out an application for that temporary outdoor dining. And so we did come up with an application, which is on our website under our COVID page for business owners. It is reviewed for safety, egress, and health So it does go out to all different parties to be reviewed and signed off on. So we do have a pretty good process in place. We've got it on our Facebook page. We've got it on the town website. EDC has been pushing it out. So, you know, as information is coming in and as those new sector rules are coming out, we are pushing that out to all the businesses and just sort of keeping on top of it. One thing that was discussed today that I am kind of interested in your guys' feedback on, because I gave mine to Laura, is there was an executive order that came out yesterday that talks about the CEOs of towns appointing enforcement people for compliance with all these executive orders. And it specifically says it won't be health directors or health inspectors, which I find super interesting because they're the most appropriate person when you read these executive orders. And so, you know, she was kind of talking about, you know, zoning doing it or planning doing it. And I said, we're not really the appropriate people. I mean, our stuff is so limited. You know, these orders talk about, you know, where sanitation stations are, you know, the distance between tables, what they can and they can't do. But, you know, you guys kind of, you hire and oversee our zoning officer. So I thought some feedback from you guys might be useful. We're going to have another conversation about it tomorrow, but you know, I just can't see Jerry running all over Durham and Middlefield because it's a conversation in Middlefield for him too, enforcing stuff that we really don't know anything about. Thoughts from you guys?
I don't see anyone with their hand up, but Matt, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
I'm not entirely sure how to tackle this. I mean, on the one hand, I definitely sympathize with the businesses and think that we should be cutting them some slack. On the other hand, if it's an executive order from the state level, I'm not sure what we can even do. I don't know. I don't know what the legal ins and outs are, I guess. And while I'm thinking about it, somebody in the chat asked a question.
Oh, I didn't see. Let's see. I signed on late and I missed the public comment section.
No, we've already passed that, unless it's regarding the public hearing. That'll be later on. That'll be at 8 o'clock. But thank you for pointing that out. So go ahead, Matt, you were going to continue, or did you have any other thoughts?
No, that was kind of it. I'm not sure with an executive order what our purview is in regards to a lot of that stuff. And again, I'd err more on the side of helping the business owner out right now more than anything else.
Okay. Other comments or questions for Robin regarding the governor's executive order?
I see Joe has his hand up.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, Robin, you had a discussion with Laura about this?
Yeah, so Laura's the one who brought up, are you talking about the enforcement side of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Laura brought it up today, and I told her my opinion that I didn't think that Jerry or myself are the appropriate and, you know, executive order enforcers, because most of the stuff doesn't have anything to do with zoning. I mean, for all intents purposes, zoning is exempt pretty much for the outdoor dining. The liquor permits were extended without needing to go through the commission. There's exemptions for violations built into the executive order for zoning. So from our perspective, I don't see that there would be much a business that would be doing that wouldn't already be exempt. So this enforcement portion of it really has to do with the totality of the executive orders for each division of businesses that are open. So, you know, I use the example that, you know, the restaurants have to have the hand sanitizer at their entrance. They can't have their bar open. Their tables have to be 6 feet apart. You know, that's the type, if somebody made a complaint about that, that's the enforcement that they're going to be looking to appoint someone to go out and handle. And I just don't know that Jerry, as the zoning officer, is the most appropriate person. It really should be our health officials, but somehow they were able to get them exempted from doing the enforcement in the executive order, even though they're the ones who know all those rules. So I just wanted feedback from you guys as to what your thoughts were, because we're going to carry on the conversation tomorrow.
Well, I think we had some discussion the last time, and basically, I thought the commission's opinion at that point was let these things continue and not acknowledge them as being permanent.
Yeah, we're going to do that. And again, it's a little different because this is enforcement of all of the executive orders and the things that fall outside of zoning. So I was just trying to get your guys' thoughts on having the zoning officer possibly going out and enforcing things that aren't related to zoning enforcement.
So if Laura knew that was your position, did she have any, offer any options? in how
No,
we're
I
gonna
you know,
handle
I
it?
think she's stuck because the police are saying, well, we're not going to do it. The health officials, like I said, were exempted out of doing the enforcement right in the executive order. But the executive order says the CEO of towns has to appoint someone. So, she's kind of brainstorming like who's the most appropriate person and who do we send out, and I understand where she's coming from, but I just don't know that, sending out your zoning officer to tell someone where your hand sanitizer is supposed to be because a complaint came in might be the best option. So I'm just sort of, you guys had, there's 9 of you, thought maybe brainstorming with you guys during here might have some ideas that, I can offer up tomorrow at the meeting.
No.
So just for clarification, they passed an executive order that outlines a bunch of expectations on restaurants, and then didn't give towns the ability to regulate the executive order by taking away the ability of the health officials to check.
Yeah, so it's, all these executive orders come out, days apart and are written by different people is what I'm assuming. But yeah, so they have these opening guidelines that came out for each sector that opens. And then yesterday they had an executive order that came out that said health officials aren't going to be doing the enforcement, but CEOs of towns can appoint someone to do the enforcement on any complaints that come in for violations of any of the executive orders. So it's a little odd. And again, I think it puts, first selectmen and town managers in an awkward position because your health official would be kind of the most reasonable person to say, hey, can you look at this?
Right, and no offense to Jerry, I don't know if he's the best person to be going out and investigating that kind of thing and enforcing those regulations. Plus, does that really fall under what we should be paying for in our budget?
Right.
Okay, good points. Josh, I see you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mostly, I agree. This seems like a bad way of slicing it, but, and it is ultimately going to be up to Laura for how she handles it. But I would say that if it's a complaint that falls under the sort of broad umbrella of zoning, it might make sense. If someone's complaining that the layout that they propose to you doesn't comply, or that the parking and the outdoor seating is dangerous, okay, maybe that would be something that would fall under Jerry's purview. But I agree, the health and safety and COVID spacing type things would really fall best to somewhere else. And that may be they may have backed it all the way into a corner where Laura may end up taking it herself.
So Robin, is it not permitted to utilize the health director even if the first selectman or CEO of the town municipality determines that that's the person they'd like?
That's a good question, Frank. I was planning on going over that executive order with a fine-tooth comb before tomorrow's meeting, just to sort of see. But the way there's a whole paragraph about health directors and inspections and what they aren't going to do, and it's it pretty much exempted them pretty much out from doing enforcement. Now the state does say, I saw that they said, if you have an enforcement related issue, you can call the state and they'll look into it. But I'm sure the reality of that is, slim to none, just in my past experience with that sort of stuff. But I was just trying to, get some ideas from you guys. I sort of said something similar to Josh, which was, to Laura, that I think it can't be just a one-person deal. I think it's going to depend on the complaint and who might be appropriate to go out. So she may have to look at appointing or considering, multiple people, and maybe have a sheet that says, if it's related to the zoning application that I'm approving, then, that's something Jerry goes out and looks at. If it's a health related issue, you know, I just, it seems odd to me that if it's a health related issue, the health department doesn't go out. Or if it's something that falls under police powers, then the police officer goes out. So I think some thought needs to be given to the categories of complaints that might come in, and that it might be more than one person who is involved in that type of enforcement. So that is what I said to her earlier. So
All
The
right.
way it's written, it does allow for multiple people. And I think that the reason that they tried to exempt the public health director is because they specifically call out public health facilities. So I think their intent was probably to prioritize that their focus would be on hospitals and nursing homes and that sort of thing. Just trying to guess from them as I read this.
yeah, that would make sense, Phil.
Okay. All right, Robin. So let us know how you make out tomorrow with the meeting. What is it? Is it just you and Laura, or are you going to get OPM involved, or
It's
anyone
supposed
else?
to be Laura and Ed Bailey from Middlefield, Jerry and myself to just sort of troubleshoot and talk about it. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and if necessary, maybe reach out to Sam up at River Coggan. I know he's in touch because all of the he's in charge of all the cogs now, kind of representing them. And I know there's been back and forth with OPM several times about some of these things. So maybe we can ask him if need be. If you guys have any questions and there's no straight shot answer, maybe we'll touch base. All right. With that, it is now 8 p.m. and it would be appropriate to have a motion to exit our regular meeting and move into the public hearing. If someone would like to make such a motion.
I'll make a motion. We leave the regular meeting and go into the public hearing.
Motion's been made by Joe Pasquale. Is there a second?
A second.
And the second is Chris Bailey?
Yep.
All right. And then with that, is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed, and for the record, the members that were seated for the regular meeting are seated for the public hearing. All right. This is the public hearing for the adoption of draft regulations for farm breweries, cideries, wineries, and distilleries. And I want to start off by allowing Robin Newton, the town planner, an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the revised language that was crafted and should have been sent out to all the members and posted on the town website. So Robin, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so there was really only one update based on comments from the last meeting, and that is the addition of phasing language. You know, after kind of going back and forth as to whether it should be in the reg or whether we do it site by site, I thought from an enforcement standpoint, it made more sense to have some definitive language in the regulation to point to. And then, you know, the commission can obviously condition it additionally as part of the special exception process. So that was really the only thing that was added. That language is under the standards section, and it says a phasing plan shall be required for the growing and production of the crops during the first 5 years of operation. It is understood that the 25% requirement during the first 5 years may come from other sites in the state of Connecticut. Extensions to this phasing requirement may be requested to the commission if a hardship can be established. So it's similar to the language that the state has, except for they use tons. They have language about tonnage in there, and they give them up to 7 years. So I thought 7 was pretty far out. So we went with 5, and we went with a little bit more definitive language that matches the 25% and keeping it Connecticut grown, which will then be Durham grown by the time they phase in.
Okay. Commissioners that have questions for Robin regarding the revision to the language. And Robin, I think the purpose of that was just so that they can come up with a plan that will show that they're going to make a certain amount of production each year or after or before the 5-year mark, right?
Right. It's to show that, you know, obviously the whole point of this is that the agricultural component is going to be our primary use. And obviously the the winery, brewery, cidery, whatever it is, with the tasting room as our secondary or accessory use. But also realizing that if you're brand new and you're purchasing a property and you're getting up and going, a vineyard could take 3 years before they get their first kind of harvest of grapes. So wanted to be, acknowledge that, and the state does acknowledge it in their statutes. So I thought it would be good for us to acknowledge it in the regulation and not just have it as a condition of approval.
Okay. All right. Commissioners have questions for Robin? If not, I will turn this over to the public. And for the public, the members of the public that are participating on the Zoom call tonight, if you know how to raise your hand, down on the bottom of the participant screen, there is a raise hand icon that you can click and put your hand up. If you are live on video and you are waving your hand and we can see you, we'll also call on you that way. But if you would, we'll speak one at a time. I'm going to start with Janet Morganti. Janet, I saw you have your hand up. Go ahead. Janet Morganti.
If she doesn't come through, I'd like to speak. Duncan Milne.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me or not?
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents one more time. First of all, I want to thank you all for working so hard on this. Robin, you've done a great job, and you've listened to your suggestions and taken them into account. The only thing I really wanted to throw out there was, at the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion about having a winery in a residential area. Now, as far as I understand, we have industrial, we have commercial, and we have farm residential. If I'm missing something, is there some other zone? Is there, besides Main Street residential? But the rest of the town is farm residential, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and there's always that concern of the traffic, the noise, the trash, the this, the that we hear all the time. And there's no way around it. It's going to be in somebody's backyard. And I get frustrated with the not in my backyard mentality. And part of the ambiance of having a vineyard in the rolling hills of Durham is because you're in the rolling hills of Durham. You got a beautiful view. You've got trees and sun, and that's the kind of atmosphere that people are looking for. And that seems to be where the most resistance is, to have a vineyard or a brewery or whatever. And my other question too was, this, you guys may be able to answer or not. I have learned that there is a farm in town that's growing hops. Now, they may not be producing anything. I don't think they are, but are they regulated the same way just because they're growing hops as a farm brewery would be? I think I know the answer, but I just want to verify. Maybe Robin can answer that. And that's really all I have. Thank you.
All right, and we'll get some answers to you as soon as we bring the commission members and Robin back on. We're going to move on to Jessica. I see you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Andrew Sheff. This is my wife's computer. That's why it says Jessica.
Okay.
So anyways, I wanted to thank the town and the board for allowing myself and the others the opportunity to speak tonight into the regard of this hearing's topic. I was able to virtually attend the May 6th meeting discussing this topic. I heard the concerns of the board members and the residents of adopting these regulations, of which I am empathetic, but I also heard optimistic remarks about these types of businesses and how they could be uplifting to a small town like Durham's economy and community. And I also wanted to state that I've been a resident of Durham for 7.5 years now. My wife and her family grew up here. I wanted to share some industry information and my thoughts on why I support the adoption of these regulations for these businesses. I'm going to focus on the brewery side of it because I am a craft beer enthusiast. I am a professional brewer, and I'm also an employee at a currently operating brewery in our state. In Connecticut, there's approximately 100 breweries, 24 wineries, 10 hard cider makers, and 15 craft distilleries. That might seem like a lot, However, the craft beer industry continues to grow nationwide, and the numbers of breweries per capita in Connecticut still much room to grow. Out of the 100 breweries in our state, there seems to be less than a dozen that are classified as a farm brewery. Some of them have growing operations for beer production purposes, such as hops and grains, or they're situated on a property that portrays a working farm. The lot sizes range from 2 acres to as large as 50 acres. I've attempted researching the zoning regulations for all of the towns that these breweries reside in, and the majority of them also don't have posted brewery regulations like us. Some of the towns have very little information on farming regulations as well, such as the lot sizes, etc. A brewery within that group of farm breweries that sticks out to me the most is Fat Orange Cat in East Hampton, which opened in 2016. The brewery was one of the first of its kind being operated in a residential zone, and now there's several more throughout the state. This brewery operates out of a converted small barn adjacent to the owner's home on a 2-acre property. There's no on-site growing. However, they do have some goats and chickens, which are really more of pets. The town of East Hampton created the regulations, and if you want to look at them, it's on their regulations page in section 8.4L. They wrote them just so that Fat Orange Cat could open. Fat Orange Cat created a large following, especially by the local residents and residents from the surrounding towns. However, their popularity draws people down for day trips from surrounding states as well. Since they first opened for business, the owners have renovated their property to allow for on-site parking. Their initial lack of on-site parking was likely the biggest bump in the road and the growing pain faced as Fat Orange Cat grew in popularity. The brewery is open for limited hours on Saturdays and Sundays only, and they close from the end of December to the end of March. Another example of an extremely popular farm brewery operating in the residential zone would be Fox Farm in Salem. They're a larger operation which opened in 2017. They're also open from limited hours on Thursday through Sunday. And they actually enacted their own rule which limits customers to 2 full beers, 16-ounce pours, or 4 half pours for them to consume on the premise out of respect for their location and the surrounding neighbors. Customers are able to purchase beer to go on site though. I think that mandating larger lot sizes to 10 acres or more may strongly deter all of these types of businesses from coming to Durham. Obviously mostly knowledgeable about the beer manufacturing industry, but it's a very capital intensive business venture based on the required equipment alone just to make the beer. So when you bundle that in with the large piece of property, building or rehabbing a structure, making parking areas, it could become a cost prohibitive business such as these to set up shop in our town. Connecticut general statutes require farm breweries to utilize 25% initially and eventually 50% of Connecticut grown products in beer production. I believe this to be very reasonable. It allows for supporting Connecticut grown agriculture while allowing breweries who are experts in the process of making and manufacturing beer to utilize well-grown products from the people that are experts at growing what they grow, be it hops or grain, etc. The state doesn't mandate that the farm breweries are only allowed to brew beer with their own products grown on their own property, nor do I believe that any of the breweries in the state operate under such restrictive statutes. Forcing a farm brewery to use 50% or even 100% of their own products seems not only prohibitive to a business to undertake, but it could also result in a subpar or low quality product. Our state is not able to produce products of the same high quality, such as Pacific Northwest, the hops that are grown there, or the cereal grains of the West. You can't produce agricultural products like the hops and grains found on century-old farms in Germany and England. I'm in no way implying that we can't grow high-quality agricultural products in Connecticut. However, I am saying that specific to the beer industry, access to more expansive agricultural products make for a better and more diverse beer option. This is what the market of craft beer lovers is looking for, supporting local while still having great tasting product as the end result. similar to the practice of many New England vineyards that they seem to follow, utilizing some of their own products, as Robin mentioned, or surrounding areas products with other grape varieties from across the globe to enhance their offerings for their consumers. Even the big beer companies in the industry like Anheuser-Busch don't solely use crops grown on their own farms. They source items from all over the world. This regulation will only limit the brewer in producing the best quality product possible while potentially setting the business up for failure. I do believe that a farm brewery should have some type of agricultural aspect, even if unrelated, that takes place on the property or with conjunction with another farm property. And I wanted to give another example of Kent Falls Brewery. They have a very small growing area on their farm, and they utilize most of their property for meat farming. The brewing world is all about collaboration. It's a part of what makes each creation special and unique. I've personally worked within the industry for over a year, and I've been visiting craft breweries around the country for over 10 years. Whenever I go on a trip, I make it a point to find and visit local breweries to try the new beers and support the growing industry. I've never witnessed a brewery crowd get out of control or create a disturbance, something you might see at a typical bar scene. The average brewery patron is an adult over the age of 30, most likely a full-time employee with a partner or often a family. These businesses are not like nightclubs or any inner city bars. They're well-kept, neatly appointed, welcoming, family-friendly environments that draw a demographic of people with some disposable income. They're the same people who would come into our town and go out to dinner after visiting the brewery, the winery, or the cidery. They might spend the morning or the afternoon hiking on some of our trails or walking down Main Street, stopping to visit some of the shops in town. We can continue to be this quaint, quiet little Connecticut town that tourists seek out. Many breweries become very involved in their communities. They get behind their local community by supporting charities, having fundraising events, collaborating with other local businesses, and giving back to the community that embraced and accepted them. They create an environment where the locals can have community with their friends and families and with the opportunity to meet new people. Promoting community, relaxation, fun, peace, happiness, and good vibes. The times are changing, and I think it's possible to step into the future while still preserving the culture and history of our small town. We can make calculated, thoughtful efforts to allow conscientiousness, motivated people desiring to open these types of businesses in Durham. This can not only help boost our local economy, but also create a place that the town residents and outsiders alike want to visit. I can go on and on about this topic, and I'm obviously very deeply passionate about it, but I want to give others a chance to be heard as well. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Jesse Allen, and that'll be followed by Duncan Mill. Go ahead, Jesse.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. So tonight I'm going to be speaking on behalf of the Agricultural Commission. So we had mentioned this in the previous meeting, but first and foremost, the Agricultural Commission, is in full support of this regulation. It's an amazing opportunity for the community, existing farmers, and of course, new and upcoming farmers. And really, we wanted to, thank the Planning and Zoning for putting this together because it really is a great thing that we're doing here. In the last meeting, we brought forward several recommendations to the draft regulation. Most importantly, the two that we focused on were the minimum acreage and the setbacks. Our stance at the time was that the acreage should be increased and more specific should be added in relation to, the language, of course, around the setbacks. So anyone that owns a farm knows that some of the success of that farm comes from the support of their neighbors. And our concern is that this small of an acreage requirement, and with this type of business, it may have an impact on that relationship and our neighbor's way of life. So the Agricultural Commission is kind of in a unique place here where we obviously support this regulation because of the agricultural aspect of it and the type of business. But at the same time, we need to be cognizant of the impact on our neighbors. And I've had somewhat limited involvement in town meetings, but I have been getting more and more involved. And there, of course, is somewhat of a theme, that pops up where we don't get so much public involvement maybe up front, but we tend to get a high public high level of public involvement when folks are displeased or surprised. So the Agricultural Commission wanted to make a step to potentially avoid that surprise. Now, our original stance was 25 acres, and I'll be frank in that that may have been way on the high end of the spectrum. But we still feel that the 5 acres is too small. So what we want to do is we want to go forward with a survey out to the public. I don't know if this is something that's normally administered or used, but I thought it would potentially be a good idea. It would be a simple social media based survey, 2 or 3 questions that would focus on some of the aspects of the regulation that could potentially impact the community the most. Of course, the theme of the survey would ultimately assume, right, the regulation and the adoption of farm breweries was going to be, coming to the town, but we just wanted to get some more insight on some specifics. Facebook has several large group forums, 2,500 to 3,500 members. I know the data could be skewed because of duplicate submissions, or you may get some middle field resident involvement. But the point isn't so much of those items, but it's just to get a data set of what is the community's thoughts on these things, specific maybe to the acreage and the setbacks. And then let's take that data and use it, not use it, digest it, discuss it, and kind of move forward after that. Our plan was to have the questions completed by this week and the survey out by early next week. Now I understand there may be a vote on the table tonight, so I may be a little bit late to the game, but I just wanted to make everyone aware. And we would like to share, of course, the results of that data with the Planning and Zoning Commission, which would be after a week's time frame. So with that, that's really all I wanted to share tonight. And again, I just really wanted to thank everyone for all the work that's been up to this point. We're pretty excited about the regulation.
Thank you, Jesse. All right, next we have Duncan Mill. Robin, can you unmute Duncan Mill's line?
Where did he go? Oh, hold on.
He's there.
Yeah, I see him. He keeps moving around. For some reason, it's not letting me unmute him.
Duncan, can you hear us? If you can you unmute your line? There you go. Go ahead, Duncan, you're on.
Yeah, hi, Duncan Milne, 253 Main Street in the Historic District. And my concern, my understanding anyway, is that this proposal was for all districts. And I'm all for the general idea, but it would not be applicable in any way, in my mind, to the Main Street residential area. For one thing, it wouldn't have the acreage, but anyway, we've been more or less to battle on the issue of introducing commercial into Main Street. But that's my concern. It seems like it's not even appropriate practically to include Main Street in it. But besides that, I'm strongly against opening the door to further commercial on Main Street. That's the gist of my thought.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
I don't see any other hands up.
Frank, there's a Carol who messaged me that she has a question. So Carol, if you're on and can unmute yourself.
Actually, yeah, she can unmute herself. She can ask, and then we'll answer when we turn it back to you, Robin.
Yep. Carol, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a quick question. With this regulation, will it be located on a town road or will it be on a interior or a state road? I don't want to have another issue like we do on Shady Lane.
All right, what we're going to do to everyone that's on tonight's calls is, because this is the public comment for this application, which is an application of the commission, is Robin is logging all of these questions, and she's going to respond when we turn it all back over to her to all of the questions. Did you have any other questions, Carol?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, and I see Andrew Taylor also. Andrew, did you want to ask?
Hey, Frank, thank you very much. So, yeah, it was just a question around if it was a requirement for the farm cafe to be located on the farm site. It's just not clear. It's just not explicitly clear on the documentation if that is a requirement.
All right, we'll have Robin answer that when we turn it over to her. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak? I see Rick, you have your hand up. Go ahead, Rick Parmalee. Rick, we can't hear you. You're going to have to unmute yourself on your computer.
Oh, can you hear me now, Frank?
We can. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate the work that the commission has put into this and our town planner. And also, I enjoyed listening to all the comments previously. Being born here in town, raised here in town on a dairy farm, I still tend to think of farms as dairy farms, not, breweries and stuff. But anyway, it is, and I would like to see agriculture, remain in the community. And hopefully, it looks to me like everyone's trying to do the right thing. I don't want to regulate something to death, so it would make it impossible. But I'm very much in favor of business in the community. Business what makes the world go around. Thank you. I'm going to go mute.
Thank you very much, Rick. Are there any other members of the public that have questions or wish to make comments? All right. With that, I'm now going to turn it back over to Robin Newton, who is our town planner, and she can speak to some of the questions that were asked possibly, and then we'll turn it back over to the Planning and Zoning Commission members. Go ahead, Robin.
Okay, so hopefully I jotted down everyone's questions. So there was a question about a farm currently growing hops and whether or not it's regulated the same as what we're trying to attempt to pass tonight. So the growing, I don't know if there's a farm growing hops, so I don't have any information on that. Maybe the Agricultural Commission might, or members of the commission might, but as far as them growing, that's just considered agriculture. It's allowed under our current regulations. It falls under the reg that we're adopting in that it's a agricultural crop, but it's not pertinent to the rest of the information that's on there, unless they want to start a farm brewery up, and in which case they could come in for this reg if it's adopted. The farm cafe is listed under permitted accessory uses. So yes, it would have to be on the property that the agricultural crop is being grown on, or practice is taking place. The agricultural component is the primary use. All of those permitted accessory uses, if you look at the reg, tastings, tours, retail, events, wine sales, farm cafe are all accessory uses. So it would be on the same lot as the agricultural component of it. Now there may be a primary lot where most of that's taking place and maybe they farm also additional acreage on another lot, that's possible, but it should be on the same lot as the primary agricultural use. I think Carol had a question about vineyards on approved town roads. So we don't have language on approved town roads versus state roads. Shady Lane was mentioned. Shady Lane is an approved town road. It's just unimproved as far as access to it. We certainly, I don't think would be looking to have someone have a farm brewery, a winery on a dirt road, even if it's an approved town road, and there would have to be improvements made to that. But we're not limiting it to a state road or a town road. That language isn't in there. So hopefully that answers Carol's question. Duncan commented about all districts. It is allowed in all districts, but it does have to be over 5 acres. So it pretty much is going to take out your Main Street residential. So I don't think there's really much concern about an application coming in under this along, the historic district for sure. And I think that answered all of the questions. If I missed something, if someone wants to raise their hand and ask, I'd be happy to answer it.
Okay. All right. So members of the public, I'm going to allow the Planning and Zoning Commission members to talk for a while. If you think of anything that you'd like to ask, then just put your hand up, and when we get to return back to the public, we'll talk. All right, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Josh, did you have your hand up? You're on mute, Josh.
Sorry, I didn't actually have my hand up at the moment, but I was planning on putting my hand up. One thing that I would like to discuss at some point, and it doesn't have to be now, but I do think the description and purpose needs to be expanded. I did add that to the email that was read last week. And mostly because I think the planning and zoning document may be clear to people who are very familiar with it, but I wouldn't want misunderstandings from people such as like, is this going to keep a vineyard from growing grapes at all? Like, do they have to get a special exception? And the answer is clearly no. They can be farming and having grapes, but not have people come to their farm and have a tasting room without this regulation. So I think that we should just be more clear about the purpose and description. And so I had taken a stab at some of the things that I thought should be added to it. And just for people's memories, I'll read the section, which is currently it just talks about, to be clear, you can see, to allow for economic diversity and sustainability of agricultural uses, to preserve agricultural activities. And then these uses are permitted as accessory uses and should remain subordinate to the primary agricultural use. I'm summarizing what's written in the regulation. And I was thinking that it should be expanded to also include language around that the regulation should in no way limit the growing, producing, or distributing of agricultural products, including ciders, beer, wines, or liquor as allowed under Connecticut General Statute Section 1(1)Q, which is essentially Connecticut's general statute that deals with farms. And then I also thought that maybe some language around the reason we have this as a special exception is to protect neighbors, because it is a sort of expanded agricultural use that doesn't fit clearly, like isn't traditional agriculture, as Mr. Parmalee rightly pointed out. And so that there is the possibility for some disruption, and that our job as the Planning and Zoning Commission is to try to mitigate that. And so I didn't read the whole proposal that I put in. It is in the email. I'm happy to read it if that would be helpful, but it's on the website as well for people to look at.
Thank you very much, Josh. All right, other members of the commission that wish to speak? All right. I see, Joe, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, I see Dickhead is up too. He can go first.
Oh, go ahead, Dick.
Is that age before beauty or what?
It is, Dick.
Well, the only question I brought up last time is a concern, not just me, but I guess a lot of people, the Farm Commission, about the size of the operation. I mean, quite obviously, if you're on a back road, for instance, it's going to be, 5 acres, and the amount of traffic it generates could be a problem. And I still maintain that I think 10 acres is probably more appropriate, quite frankly. And there certainly is a compromise to the 25 acres of the Ag Commission. But the fact that it may be on a limited access road, not a highway, not even a so-called access road like, for instance, Haddle Quarter Road or any of the roads that connect into the so-called country road concept, it could be a problem if it's located in a cul-de-sac, for instance. I think it needs to, quite frankly, be more than just 5 acres. I heard somebody, and I think it was Josh, mention liquor, and it's, at that point, I don't think liquor should be included in any of these operations. That is something that is more to a restaurant and to a saloon as opposed to an agricultural enterprise such as farming. And outside of that, I think that a lot of the items that were covered and that were sent out are appropriate. I don't know about this so-called agricultural, or somebody suggested going out and doing some kind of a survey, which again leads me to question whether in fact we need to discuss this further and have more input with more people, and hopefully, if that's possible in another meeting, the meeting become live instead of this, which I'm not really used to, the so-called video bit. But anyway, I won't bloviate anymore, but again, my concern really is on the amount of acreage, and that will still be my main concern.
All right. Joe, you were next.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I have concerns about some of the language. The first portion, grown on site or conjunction with a lot. And that's listed under the farm, brewery, cidery, winery, distillery. So ingredients are grown, excuse me, on site or in conjunction with a farm property located in the town of Durham. It seems to me having the word "or" allows the opening for somebody to have a brewery, cidery, winery on a piece of property and grow nothing, as long as they're in conjunction with somebody else growing something somewhere else in Durham. And to me, that's an issue that, you know, we're potentially could be allowing something to take place that has nothing to do, in fact, with a piece of property that has no agricultural activity except for a vineyard or a brewery. So I think that language needs to be changed. Because an applicant could come in and say they want to start it and they're going to be doing it in conjunction with somebody else and never be growing anything on their property. And I don't think that's, I hope that's not our intent. So I would like to have discussion about that. The other language issue is with 14.6.3, item number 2. In the first sentence, all minimum standards and setbacks of underlying zone shall be met this. I don't think this is intended to be there.
All right. We'll have Robin look into that and give us a response here in a second. Any other comments, Joe?
Yep.
Okay.
I think in regards to the permitted accessory uses, in regards to mostly the tasting rooms that will be involved or the farm cafes, what do commissioners see or envision? What will or will not be allowed indoors with a general approval application? Is music allowed, or can they hold weddings or private parties, or is that going to fall under the event permit? I don't think we're specific enough to what type of activities beyond the tasting and selling. I don't think we're specific enough, and we're leaving that kind of open to be addressed.
All right. If you have any other comments, Joe? If not, I have Chris. Chris is after you.
I still have more. One of the issues too, I think, for clarity in the language, maybe we should include something about not allowing banquet halls, because we're not specific in our tasting room size or limitations. And I don't think the intent is to create banquet halls in our residential areas. So, and I think that maybe we should consider sizing the tasting rooms. If a 5-acre parcel of land is ends up being approved in this regulation, that what might be acceptable on 20 or 30 or 50 acres in size of a tasting room and capacity, I'm sure is not going to be the same on a 5-acre piece of property. And that maybe we should look to try to scale the size of the buildings with acreage somehow. And as I said before, I'm not in favor of the 5 acres. I definitely believe it needs to be more. I'm not in favor of not having any setbacks beyond the underlying zone setbacks, because I don't think that addresses it adequately. And I guess Josh had given an example where when I mentioned about a patio, an existing patio, Josh had mentioned at the last hearing, well, we just tell them no. Well, I don't think we want to be in the business of telling people no, but that without any setbacks beyond the underlying zone, I think we're just going to have a lot of issues ahead of us and a lot of unhappy applicants when their vision of something, because we're not specific enough, they come in, and I don't think we want to be in the business of saying no to people. I think we want to be in the business of approving applications and being specific and clear enough. And I'll go back to what Laura said in our first public hearing, Laura Francis, that she hoped we would be specific as to what is allowed so the applicant has a clear path to approval. We don't want to have a developer jumping through hoops, and they will look for the easiest path. And if we're trying to encourage people to come here for economic activity, I think that we're being too vague and probably going to have more potential problems as we go forward. I know Duncan had mentioned the Main Street residential zone. I brought that up in our early discussions about this. I don't think the Main Street residential zone should be included in this because of the tightness and the closeness of all the housing that's on our Main Street. Most of those are 1/4 acre to 1/3 acre lots. And to me, I think we should be excluding the Main Street residential zone from this. Someday there may be a 5-acre parcel of land through combination of properties, and with the tight clustering of homes, I don't think it's something that would be appropriate for our historic Main Street.
All right, thank you, Joe. I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Chris, go ahead. You're muted, Chris. Please, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Of course.
Yeah, fine, go ahead.
Seems to me that many of these concerns are allayed by the basic reality that this has to first be a working farm. So if, the question about the or in each one of them suggests that you could have a piece of land that isn't a working farm and the farm is somewhere else. But I think that the regulation addresses that pretty straightforwardly, that this has to be located on a working farm where the primary use is agriculture. I think that also helps essentially eliminate the issue on the Main Street Historical District. That is not a place where there's going to be a working farm. There isn't, you have to combine 15 of those plots together to get up to the acreage and create a working farm there. I think the regulation is written reasonably enough at this point that, it is fairly obvious what it is we're trying to accomplish. And that's all I have to say for the moment.
Thank you very much. And you're quite right. Special permit is required as well.
All of this, so.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to turn it back over to Robin. And Robin, a couple things. First of all, maybe you can respond to some of those concerns. The second thing is Josh did present some language, and maybe you'd like to read that so we can talk about it a little bit.
Yep. So let's start with Josh's email. So it was included in the packets and it has been up on the website, and under description and purpose. He added to what we already have in the reg and included language that says, and I'm just going to read the whole thing. It does include the language that's there now, but just so it's all encompassing. The intent of this regulation is to allow for economic diversity and sustainability of agricultural uses and to preserve agricultural activities while protecting neighboring property owners from possible disruption caused by agritourism activities. These uses are permitted as accessory uses to an agricultural operation and should remain subordinate and incidental to the primary agricultural use. This regulation in no way is intended to limit the growing, producing, or distributing of agricultural products, including beer, cider, wines, or liquor as allowed under Connecticut General Statute Section 1-1Q.
All right. Commission members, you've heard the language Robin just read, and you've seen it before, I think was sent to everyone. So are there any feelings for that language or against? I can tell you, I think it's pretty good, but what are your thoughts?
This is Chris. I think it'd be fine to include. I got no issue.
Okay. Anyone else?
Frank, this is Jim. I just have a question. When you say it's not supposed to interfere with the normal distribution of beer, cider, wine, how would you? I just don't understand how that's going to work on a farm unless you have. Where does that work? I don't see how that. I mean, I completely understand if you're selling hay, we're selling beef, we're selling anything else, but beer, cider, wine is kind of. Are we saying that that's what we're going to be producing on the farm?
I'll let Josh answer that. Josh?
Well, to be clear, this was my proposal. You may be right in that I'm overstepping what Connecticut General Statute would allow you to do. My vision for it, and yes, I went a little maybe too far, was you can imagine having an orchard. You could imagine that orchard producing cider, and then them distributing it. You know, they might have a tractor trailer come and pick up their cider that they've, had on the farm and take it away to market, right? None of that, I think, would require this application, because that to me seems like it falls under natural, like the existing agricultural regulations. Now, maybe you're right. Maybe it's too far to say beer, wines, and liquor, and maybe it should just cut all that out and just say growing, producing, or distributing of agricultural products as allowed under, and cut out the specificity. Because I'm not actually an expert in knowing whether you can brew beer on a farm and distribute it, and that's okay.
I mean, and I like the rest of what you said. It was just that one section that caused me some pause because I didn't quite understand how it fit in.
Yeah, I'm not positive either. Maybe if Robin knows better, that would be her expertise.
Robin?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that the actual producing of the beer, cider, wine, and liquor would actually fall under the agricultural definition that you cited. I certainly think growing any of the ingredients, obviously that would lead to those kind of final products would fit under that. And if we took out the including beer, cider, wines, or liquor, I think the language is really good.
Yeah.
Okay. So is it the general consensus of the commission that the language without that last line there that Robin mentioned to taken out is a good language to be put into the proposed regulation? Is that pretty much the consensus? Go ahead, Dick.
Well, I still kind of object to the fact and use of the word liquor. You're talking now liquor being a distilled product, which is whiskey, vodkas, you name it. And while obviously you can distill alcohol from anything that's organic, which obviously means it can be grown on a farm, I think to have the word liquor in there, now you're not just talking about a winery or somebody, or a cidery, or you're talking about a saloon.
So with the last revision, which we talked about just a second ago, was to remove that. Is that word liquor still in there or no?
Well,
No, it would not be.
It would not
okay.
be. All right, so Dick, it's out.
Okay, great.
Yep. Anything for you, Dick. All right. I see Joe Pasquale has his hand up. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, the other comment that I'd like to make is, which I forgot to bring up, was the suggestion of the survey. I am also a member of the Agricultural Commission, and I think the thought and the idea of going out and getting more input from our community on this, because I do believe it's a significant change for our community, and a good one if done correctly, that I think we ought to take advantage of getting as much information and feedback from our community as possible, and see what the results of the survey are.
All right, I've got Matt Thompson and Chris Bailey. Go ahead, Matt.
Just wanted to speak to, I guess, what Joe said and then what Jesse Allen had talked about in terms of collecting data from the community in regards to especially the acreage. As long as the data is sound data and it's collected in a way where people have equal access and we're not getting just a specific demographic of people that are answering the survey, I am all for getting more data from the community. But I just want to make sure that we're getting sound data and not something that might be skewed by being posted on certain people's social media feeds where only certain people have access to it or are aware of it. I want to make sure that we're getting good data if we're going to actually reach out to the community on this. And if it's going to take a super long time, it's going to set us back in terms of getting this passed, which I think is something we also need to consider. I'm not saying we need to rush this either, but I don't know if we want to take another 2 or 3 months to get this done. But that's what I'm thinking.
That's a good point, and there's a couple of comments that I would make. And first of all, much of it is in how you ask the question. They're not the Planning and Zoning Commission's question. They're questions that are being crafted by other than us. They may be fine questions, but it's not a study that we've looked at. And really, this public hearing is the public's opportunity to weigh in. I see Chris and then Phil. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, actually, I was just essentially going to say the same thing Matt said. Facebook polls are really great if all you want to do is listen to people whine or people yell, but Facebook polls don't tell you anything real. If we want to put out some sort of a much broader survey, hard to imagine doing that without some cost, if it's going to be anything real that's going to actually tell us anything useful other than, sort of what social media is likely to generate, which is usually not useful.
Yeah. And we did get the input from the Regional Ag Commission and the Regional Planning Commission and neighboring towns. I know Robin's talked to them. So it's larger than just our circle of information here. Phil, go ahead.
Quite similar to Matt and Chris, concerns about the validity of the survey if done through social media, as was suggested. And I do think if they had wanted to do that, they could have done it a while ago to support the 25-acre proposal that they brought forth. They didn't do that, and I share Matt's concern about delaying things and Chris's concern about the cost to do it right. And then my only other comment from earlier was I find it interesting that somebody would mention the historic district and then be against farming, because if you really understand Durham's history, Main Street was farms. That's all.
Okay. All right. With that, I'm going to go to the public and then I'll come back to the commission members. So commission members, just hang on for a little bit. Let me see if there's anyone in the public that wishes to speak. I don't see any. Just let me check and make sure.
Does Rick have his hand up?
Well, 1 second. Rick, did you have your hand up? Rick Parmalee?
Yes.
Go ahead,
I
Rick.
did.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring it up, but in as much as it was brought up about Main Street was never strictly residential. Never. I'm not an expert on the history of the town, but what I looked at, even in my lifetime, never mind prior to, was never strictly residential. And I thought the Agricultural Commission's idea about a survey might have been interesting, but I'm not, you know, not particularly against it, but I don't want to see this thing held up either. Thank you again for your time.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for participating. With that, we're going to go back. Josh, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Robert stated you would have to improve it.
Yeah. So I think we should just sort of, sorry, I'm getting a little interference. The thing that I think were, right, the 2 points that the Agricultural Commission did bring up, and so I think we should just go through our thoughts on them, was the acreage and then the setbacks. The, you know, the acreage of being, because we've waffled on this a little bit, we started with 10 acres and then we came down to 5 after, I think, the initial public hearing, where we've got the feedback from the regional agriculture commissions, not our own agriculture commission, but the regional agricultural commission, which was advocating for the lowest possible acreage, right? They were advocating for the 5. I think we came in with the 10. And so I have thought about this a lot. I'm not super, you know, in some ways I would like to get our own agriculture commission's buy-in more so than the regional agricultural commission. I don't think 25 is reasonable. I think 10 is probably reasonable, but I am a little nervous. And so I'll give my concern about going up to 10, although it wouldn't stop me from voting for this. There are lots of, you know, part-time farmers. They have a working farm, but they're doing another job to supplement their income. It may be that they want to have a very small vineyard or, you know, brewery or, you know, cidery, and it could work just fine. You're right. It's hard for me to imagine that you could have a full-time job with only a 5-acre vineyard. I don't know enough, but that seems like you wouldn't be able to produce enough product with the like needs for parking and the needs for a tasting room that you'd have a big enough operation to support an income. But it could maybe work as a part-time thing. And maybe we need to be supporting those people as well, as more and more people in Connecticut are moving to part-time farming and not full-time. So that would be my concern with moving to 10 acres. But with that said, you know, I certainly want the Agricultural Commission's buy-in. You know, with the regards to the setback, you know, it's very hard for me to imagine, again, like my concern was, yep, I want to be able to preserve agricultural buildings that currently exist. And I, you know, think that having stricter setbacks may inhibit that. I also think that it is on the applicant to think about how it's going to disrupt their neighbors. And if they choose, and this was the thing Joe brought up, if they choose to put a patio right next to their neighbor, it's on us to say, no, you can't have, you know, weddings out on that patio. You like, if you want to expand your operation, I'm sorry, you got to move the patio somewhere that is more conducive to that type of thing, because yeah, you have a neighbor that you want to stay friends with, and we certainly want to protect. So those are my 2 thoughts. And so I would be okay with moving to 10 acres. I am not a huge fan of having stricter setbacks.
All right. So what I was going to say in listening to this, and I know that because I've looked at the regional ags presentation and their meetings, and also our local ag commission members and their meeting and what they talked about. There was a couple of observations, and one is that there were, in the regional realm, if you will, there were a lot of people, a lot of members of that commission that believed that there should be none. I don't know that I believe there should be none. The other is that you know, on the other hand, the other end of the spectrum was that the local ag commission said 25 acres, which I don't think is reasonable either. I don't think that people that are going to start these businesses are going to have a piece of acreage that's that large. And I think that this is an opportunity for people to get in on the ground floor of something and start something. They may not have 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 acres or more, but they might have 5-acre parcel. And as long as it's a public, a special permit rather, and the public has an opportunity to weigh in, and we're responsible in how we do it. I think for maybe a brewery that's going to do hops or something, maybe 5 acres is way too much. A winery, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 1 acre of grapes gives you somewhere around 720 bottles, and that's a good amount of grapes. I mean, it's a good amount of wine. Will you make a fortune on it? No, but you know, it's a situation where you start and you scale up maybe. And I think that that's the value of the language that was proposed by Robin, to allow a winery to come in, start up, and procure grapes, you know, some quantity of them in other places in Connecticut, and then ultimately start producing in Durham. So I guess what I'd like to do, I'd like Robin to kind of recap some of this, what we've talked about, and maybe respond to some of the concerns that were brought up by the commission members. You there, Robin?
Here, yep, just unmuting. It took me a minute.
That's fine. All right, so go ahead and maybe just kind of let's talk through some of the things we've discussed so far, the differences in the acreages and things like that, and you know, maybe what you've heard in the marketplace and people have told you that you've spoken with, and maybe respond to some of the concerns that were brought up.
So, I mean, a lot of the stuff we're discussing, we've been discussing since we first drafted the very first draft of this in February, and we've kind of gone back and forth on a lot of this. And so with this being sort of like more towards the final end of it, I think it would be good to just sort of get the commission consensus on what seems to be just a couple of sticking points that I keep writing in my notes for comments. So one is obviously the acreage. So I think it would be beneficial if we could just have the board members, you know, who wants to keep it at 5 versus 10. So maybe if we could go through one by one, that way, you know, we know whether or not this is being changed, because there's sort of been a back and forth with that. So Frank, I don't know if we can go and have them kind of one by one unmute and say 5 or 10. I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we can do that. Is there anything else? You mentioned that might be something else.
Yeah, so I think the only other thing, and there's not, I don't think this is an issue for everyone, but you know, the issue of setbacks keeps coming up. And I did see that there is an extra word "this" at the end of that sentence. So thank you, Joe, for pointing that out to me. We'll remove that. But you know, these are minimum setbacks, and we do have the language about increased setbacks may be required depending on conditions. You know, this is going to be very site specific, and you know, this regulation as written is far more, you know, it has far much more information and standards in it than our surrounding towns. But it also gives you guys the leadway to tell somebody no if they propose something that comes in that you don't think is a fit on the site that they're proposing. So, you know, it has a lot in it, but it doesn't go overboard in that it boxes you in. Because even with a special exception, if you spell out too much and they meet that standard that you spell out, you still can't say no. This gives you a little leadway to be able to say, okay, but we've said increased setbacks may be required depending on site conditions. So I think, you know, it's robust in what it provides you compared to our surrounding towns, but it's not over the top in that it still gives you a lot of leadway and room to look at a site. If it's a 5-acre site, you're probably going to be way more restrictive than if somebody comes in on a 20-acre site. So, you know, I would just caution about putting in additional information and additional information and additional information. You know, the standards that are in here are on top of what's required as part of your site plan approvals and your special exception approvals, which are other sections of the regs. So, you know, it's important to take that all into consideration. But, you know, the acreage, I think, is definitely something I'd like to hear from all the members on, just to see whether or not we're going to stay with the 5 or if we want it to go to 10. Other than that, I think everything else, you know, there's been no consensus one way or another as far as, you know, there's something in here that's problematic. The acreage does seem to keep coming back, and the setbacks have been mentioned a couple times, I think, by Joe. So I just wanted to address the setback issue.
All right, so I mean, to be clear, the setbacks are what the setbacks are in the underlying zone, except they are different in the respect that it can't be a driveway, or what's the other thing? There's a couple things it can't be.
Yeah, so we did go one step further because this is allowed in farm residential. And in farm residential, you would be allowed to have a driveway in the setback or a patio parking area. So we did go one step further and say setbacks shall be applicable to all buildings, patios, parking areas, and driveways, so that we don't see those things in the underlying setbacks to begin with. And then we went even one step further and said increased setbacks may be required depending on site conditions. So I think we've sort of covered all of those scenarios for review when they come before the board.
Great. Okay, so I'll start it off. I'm comfortable with 5 acres because it's a special permit and because that's what the state of Connecticut uses, is the 5 acres. I don't like to change things different than the state. I think it puts us in a non-competitive environment. I'm happy with 5 acres as long as it's a special permit. And if the 5 acres doesn't work, I can say no. Chris?
5 acres is fine, and I think the setbacks as written are fine.
Okay. Matt Thompson?
I'm good with the way it's written.
Okay. Josh Ettinger?
I would vote for it with 5 or 10. So I guess I'm fine with it unless it was going to go the other way.
Okay. Jim Petrowski?
I'm good with 5 and with setback provisions as written.
Okay. Dick Erickson? I can't hear you, Dick.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Dick.
I'm still with 10.
Okay. Joe?
I'm with 10.
Okay. Let's see. We got Phil Auger.
5 acres, please.
Okay. Will Spooner?
5 acres is fine by me.
Jim Frazier?
5 acres.
Okay. See who else we got here. I see John Denuzio.
I'm a 5 acre guy.
You're a 5 acre guy. All right. Let's see. Do we have anybody I haven't hit? Is there anybody I missed? Jim Frazier. We got you, right, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you did. Yep.
Okay. Then I think did we get all the commissioners? So it still seems that 5 acres is kind of the overriding number for acreage. So that being the case, Robin, I'm thinking that maybe can you read the language that the modified language that Josh has proposed without that last sentence?
Yep. Under description and purpose, it would read to say, the intent of this regulation is to allow for economic diversity and sustainability of agricultural uses and to preserve agricultural activities while protecting neighboring property owners from possible disruptions caused by agritourism activities. These uses are permitted as accessory uses to an agricultural operation and should remain subordinate and incidental to the primary agricultural use. This regulation is no way intended to limit the growing, producing, or distributing of agricultural products as allowed under Connecticut General Statute Section 1-1Q.
All right. And the other thing that was sent out to the members was the revision, the latest revision, which includes the requirement that they have to grow in a certain period of time, a plan, right, Robin?
Correct.
Do you want to read that again?
I can. So under standards, number 9, a phasing plan shall be required for the growing and production of the crops during the first 5 years of operation. It is understood that the 25% requirement during the first 5 years may come from other sites in the state of Connecticut. Extensions to this phasing requirement may be requested to the commission if a hardship can be established.
All right. So if a commission member would like to make a motion with those 2 items as Robin has read them, that they may do that. If not, we can talk about something in addition. So
I think we're still in public hearing, Frank. So we would have to close, I think, the public hearing if we're done.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, Josh. So with that, I don't see any other members of the public that have their hands up.
Jesse
Right,
Allen.
I see Jesse Allen.
Jesse Allen. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yep, real quick, just to address the timeline of the survey. At this point, I think I'll still continue forward with it. I'd be looking for a week turnaround on it, meaning questions go out this weekend, and I'd collect as much as I possibly could by the end of the week and then present the data. Not looking to delay anything, just looking to get a pulse on a larger population of the public stance, on a couple of the matters, and fully appreciate the unknowns and the irregularities of Facebook data, but it is somewhat of a staple in folks' lives now. It is well and widely used, and it is fast and effective in some ways. And again, it is just a data set to either throw out or we can take a look at it. So looking at about a week turnaround time. Thanks.
All right. And Jesse, one other thing is whether the commission decides to move forward tonight or not, that data is still useful, because if it's a special permit and that data can be, brought into the discussion, it doesn't diminish its value. So.
Okay, great.
All right. Okay. All right. So let me see if there's any other members of the public that wish to speak. No. All right. Let me see what I have here.
Shall we?
Do you somebody want to make a motion to move into close the public hearing?
This is Chris. I'll move to close the public hearing.
Okay. Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second was made by who?
Phil Auger.
Phil Auger. Thank you, Phil. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed. We need a motion to go back into our regular meeting.
This is
Make a
Chris. I'm
motion
going to go back into the regular meeting.
All right. Motion's been made by Chris. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Matt. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Declare the motion passed. And for the record, the members that were seated in the prior public hearing and the earlier regular meeting are seated for this portion of the meeting. That brings us to item number 7, adoption of a draft regulation for farm breweries, cideries, wineries, and distilleries. Is there a motion?
Can we have discussion?
Yeah, after there's a motion on the floor.
This is Chris. I move we adopt the proposed regulations as amended during the public hearing to include the additional wording, the removal of the this, and the addition of the phasing plan in standards number 9.
All right. A motion's been made by Chris. Is there a second to Chris's motion?
Second.
Second by Phil Auger. Is there any discussion on the motion? Go ahead.
Well, I've got a question about the description and
Well, I'm sorry, Joe. I'm not sure what that was. Joe, are you with us?
I'm with you. That's not me.
Okay. All right. Whoever it is, I hope you're okay.
Yeah, it sounded like they fell over.
Go ahead, Joe.
So the question I have under the description and purpose and the language change, and it references Connecticut 1-1Q. What is 1-1Q that we're referencing when the change in language seemed to be the intent of not to inhibit any agricultural type activity?
I'll turn that over to Josh to answer, Joe.
Yeah, I'm not muted. Good. So 1-1Q is just simply the state's definition of agriculture. And so this is the same reference that we make in when we try to describe what a working farm is in our farm events regulation. I will not read it, but well, unless you want me to, it's kind of extensive. Well, I'll read it.
They're all familiar with the definition of agriculture,
okay.
If that's what it is.
But I don't think it's the definition of agriculture. Is it, Josh?
It is.
It is? Okay.
Robert
very
says
good.
it is. Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
it is.
All right.
And then the other question I have, are we sending this regulation to our attorney for review?
I don't think that's the intent. I think Robin has looked at it and she's pretty experienced in regulation writing. So unless we want to rack up some.
The other regulations that we've drafted, we've sent for review. And I guess I would like a review because of the specific question I asked about the or. That I have legal concerns that it allows an applicant to come in, and the last thing I want to see us in court over an applicant that has no agricultural activity on a property in conjunction with somebody else.
But again, this says that there has to be agricultural activity that'd be the primary use of the property.
Yeah.
Or in conjunction with a farm. So if I'm an applicant, I'm saying, yep, I want a winery and I want to have a tasting room and everything. And your regulation says, or in conjunction with a farm located in the town of Durham. And I'm going to be doing it with another farm in the town of Durham.
And I think that this regulation is designed to say that's okay if you get into the 25%, but the place where your tasting room is has to be a working farm. It can't just.
But I guess my point is, Chris, none of us are lawyers, and typically an applicant's going to come in and they're going to be bringing an attorney. And I just most of you weren't involved in it, but Frank, I know was, Dick was, that there was an attorney for Greenland Realty that came in and said, well, what's on the paper is what's on the paper. And I just envision, to me, when I read it, I see a separation.
Actually, Joe, what the attorney told us was that she could lie to us.
Yeah. But that's lawyers. And to me, there's a legal question in our writing, and I think it just behooves us to have him review just that one specific, even that one specific portion of it.
I guess I don't think it's necessary, and the reason is this is a special exception that's going to come with a site plan as well. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying in that there's a concern that someone will, you know, maybe modify their plan down the road and say, but it says or, so I can just change it. But it also has a site plan, and if they deviate from the site plan, then they're in violation.
Yeah, that's correct.
And that's not what I'm saying, Josh. I'm saying that not to modify it after, but an applicant right from the start comes in and says, I have a 5-acre parcel of land. I want to create a vineyard with a tasting room or a brewery with a tasting room. And I'm doing it in conjunction with the farm down the street. They're raising the agricultural product. I have the tasting room and the vineyard.
That's not what it's saying.
Yeah, I don't think that's what it's saying either.
So
I know the intent. I know the intent, what our intent is, but the or is my legal concern.
You know, I just want to put this out there that we seem to try to be very prescriptive with our regulations, and we do a good job of it. There's always going to be somebody that's going to try to go outside the box. The special permit process is the opportunity to say, no, that doesn't comply. Yes, that complies.
So
go ahead, Robin.
Sorry, Frank. So I just want to chime in regarding Joe's concern, because this was something we did talk about back in February, and I just want to kind of go back to that conversation because it was a while ago. So there's two components to these definitions, which is what Joe's reading from. The first component is the statement that says, provided that is located on a parcel of land that is part of a working farm of a minimum size of 5 acres. So that's one component. So a working farm we defined says they have to be an active agricultural use. And then there's a comma, and it goes on to say, and where 25% of whatever the ingredients are grown on site or in conjunction with a farm property located within the town of Durham. When we changed that language, because it did read slightly different in February, it was because you guys were thinking that 25% of the ingredients may not be able to be grown on the one site, even though they will be growing ingredients, and that they may want to supplement to get to the 25% with another farm in the town of Durham. So that's where that language came in. It doesn't negate the fact that someone will have to have their farm, brewery, winery, whatever, on an acre on a parcel with a minimum size of 5 acres, that's a working farm with an agricultural component that is the primary use. That's spelt out multiple times within the regulation. So I don't see that as being a concern, and that's where that other language came in when we discussed it back in February.
Thank you, Robin. All right, any other discussion on the motion? All in favor of adopting the motion as presented, which is to adopt the regulation with the revisions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
I'm opposed. Joe Pasquale.
All right. Let the record reflect that Joe voted in the opposition. I declare the motion passed. I want to thank the public for their input on this regulation. I want to thank the Regional Ag Commission for the work that they did. I would like to thank Jen and Robin for the extensive work that they did. We do need to decide the effective date of this, and so we'll need to know what date you'd like to make this effective. I'm going to propose June 30th just because that'll give a time for, I think, publication, right, Jen? You need some time for that? All right. Does that date work? Okay, so if somebody'd like to make a motion that we make the regulation effective on June 30th, 2020.
I'll make a motion that the regulation be effective on June 30th.
All right, Josh has made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second. Chris.
Second by Chris. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed. All right, and with that, that'll move us to item number 12, which is miscellaneous. Under miscellaneous, I want to tell you that there is additional delays in the presentation that RiverCog is going to provide to the towns. However, it has been determined by the Regional Planning Committee what that path will be. They just reviewed it with the Executive Committee for the COG for the 17-town region. And that is going to be done. That presentation is going to be brought in-house to RiverCog because the firm that we hired does not seem to be very well versed with what we're looking for. So that will be a delay on that, but I suspect you'll see something within the next month or so. It will be a 30-minute website or a web-based presentation that we will watch as part of our meeting. And then you can certainly ask questions. It's actually what they're saying now is it'll be live, even though it'll be a web presentation. They'll be kind of like a PowerPoint, but they'll have questions and answers for that as well. All right, that's all I have for miscellaneous. Is there anyone else? Or if not, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Frank, did you get the budget numbers for the enforcement portion of our budget?
I have not, Joe. I can get those because they just been updated with the most recent invoice that came in.
And then if you guys could send us out the budget for this upcoming year.
Sure, sure.
Thank
I'll
you.
talk to Beth on it. All right. Anything further? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Somebody else can make it.
Dick, are you making it?
No,
You're not.
no, I'm done with motions.
All right. Well, somebody's got to make it, or we'll sit here all night.
I move we adjourn.
Chris
Second.
moves we adjourn, and second by who?
Phil.
Everybody.
Phil. Thank you very much, all, and thank you for your efforts on this regulation. Have a good evening and stay safe.
You too.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Good night.
You too. Have a good night.